Have everybody here that's going to be here this morning.
All right. Well, we only have one item today. Dr. Craig Moreland is going to talk about the Crime Prevention Fund. On your card was bridge bonding, but we're going to put that off, and then we'll do an agenda review today, a very brief agenda review for the meeting for next Wednesday. So,
Good.
with that, away we go.
Okay.
Well, good morning and welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to talk about the prevention programs. Let's see if I can. Does anyone object if I use the PowerPoint? Is that
Go for it.
okay? Assuming I can get it to come up.
Bring them down a little bit.
Okay, I'm Dr. Dolores Craig Moreland from Wichita State University. I started doing this kind of program review in Sedgwick County a long time ago. I think it's been about 20 years. And I was replaced by Jody Beeson, who was also a professor out there for a period of time. I tried retiring, but it just didn't stick very well. So I'm back doing it again. This is my second year back with these programs. So I feel like I know them pretty well, and I'd like to just kind of go through with you the setup of the programs, that is what we're trying to do in fielding a continuum, how that impacts juvenile justice here, and prevention. So the programs are supported. We have 6 programs that I'll be talking about, and they're supported from 2 sources. One is your Sedgwick County Crime Prevention Fund, which supplies more than $582,000, and the Kansas Department of Corrections Juvenile Services Prevention Fund, Grant Fund, provides $167,000. So those are the 2 financial sources. Whoops. Okay, so the 6 programs that we currently have that are part of this discussion today include the Mental Health Association provides a program called PATHS. That's an elementary school secondary prevention program. It's in schools where there are at-risk youth. They do special programming. It includes techniques to help kids learn better ways to deal with conflict. We have PANDO, which is also a secondary prevention, meaning they haven't yet gotten involved with the juvenile justice system. These are kids that are at risk for that. And it is middle school case management, and they really have an exciting life there at Hamilton and Curtis, and both those are schools with a lot of issues. And then in the tertiary prevention area, we have detention advocacy services that provides case management to assist in getting kids out of detention. The only kids that we want in detention are kids that absolutely need to be there. So this is an important, they also do short-term services. Functional family therapy is an evidence-based program. It's intensive work with families for a short period of time. They work with families who have a juvenile offender. Higher Ground, Learning the Ropes, is a substance abuse program. They do treatment. It includes an obstacle course that they work, but they do substance abuse treatment with juveniles. McAdams Academy is a school program. It lasts throughout the day. It's been offered in a 4-day-a-week format and a 5-day-a-week format. But they take kids that either have long-term suspensions or expulsions. So they take the kids that present some real behavior challenges. Teen Intervention Program was offering a cognitive behavioral approach, aggression replacement training, and they weren't able to keep their clientele base up, so they stopped doing that program. I will be talking about it, but I want you to understand that program is no longer there. Okay. Sort of background for these programs, the general thing that's happened as a result of Senate Bill 367 and some other moves that have been out there is the number of juvenile filings has come down dramatically. Referrals to juvenile correctional facilities have dropped. The main reason that's important for us to consider here in Sedgwick County is it means because there's a case length limit for these kids and a sort of a semi-closed door to the facilities, it means we have more kids here in the community. So the pressure, if you want to call it that, for programs to intervene in some fashion, that pressure is a little bit more than it used to be. So that's kind of an important consideration. The main features, if you haven't had occasion to know about Senate Bill 367, its main features have to do with setting supervision case limits and with restricting the choices of going into state custody and going to correctional facilities, those sorts of things. So one of the things that's also a kind of a backdrop, if you will, to these programs that talks about our community as a whole is the whole question of racial and ethnic disparity. These programs are helping us to address any gaps we might find in this because their success rates for minority youth have equaled those of majority kids. This year is the first time they've been absolutely equal if you consider all minority youth. And the two largest minority groups, which is African American youth and Hispanic youth, those two groups actually had a higher success rates in some of the programs than Caucasian children did. So that says that whatever responsivity issues, whatever things have been getting in the way of success, at least in these programs, we're having good success with those things. Okay. And when it comes to gender, in the past, females have always been more successful in these programs than males have been. This in 2018 fiscal year, the rates for both were the same. So that again tells you that something that's an important consideration in dealing with individual factors is being successfully addressed. So the comprehensive plan reviews the 8 risk needs responsivity domains. Those 8 domains have research that prove those are the things that really drive criminal behavior. In talking about it, experts in R&R say that these are the big 3, the antisocial personality, antisocial cognitions, and antisocial associates. It's possible your grandmother was right when she said it makes a difference who you play with. So not too shockingly, if you find youth hanging out with kids that are engaging in bad behavior, they seem to have a tendency to pick it up. And if you get really thrilled and excited by doing dangerous and illegal things, I think we can all see that that's going to create some problems. And criminal thinking is mostly, antisocial cognition is mostly about solving life's problems using criminal means. If you're short of money, instead of going and finding a job, you think about who you can steal or rip off in some way. So those are pretty clear cut. Then the second tier, this thing is not moving very fast. Okay. Second tier that Team Justice has set includes factors that we find predominantly as elevated risks in the youth in our community. And these are not listed according to the strength of them. These are just 4 that are all kind of on a second tier. Family, if there's difficulties in family relationships, if there's difficulties with school and or work situations where the person feels alienated and unable to accomplish reasonable goals, that makes for higher risk of delinquency. If they don't have good patterns of leisure and recreation, same thing. And substance abuse, of course, something like 70% of those who get involved with the criminal justice system, whether as juveniles or adults, have significant substance abuse issues. So those are the ones that Team Justice, after looking at the local data, said these are in addition to the big three, these 4 are worthy of our consideration. And if you look at the chart, this is the actual document. I think the commissioners at least have it. And if you look at page 19, you'll see a display of the risk factors that are addressed by our programming. 4 of them do address antisocial thinking, and 5 of them address antisocial thinking. 4 are oriented toward family, 3 toward school, and 1 each for the other risk factors. It's in our best interest to have that spread, not just put all of our eggs in one basket, because we know that the youth that we see may have some criminal conduct in common, but the things that have driven it are unique to their situation. So maybe one child is going to have years of not succeeding at school and getting in conflict and acting out their frustrations over that until it finally tips over into some kind of criminal conduct. So then we aren't going to make too much progress with that kid unless we are successful in addressing the risk factor that got him there. So that's kind of what we're doing, is making sure that we have a full menu so that when a kid evidences a certain kind of risk, we have something that will address that. Sorry, I seem to be fighting the equipment here. I'm not sure what I'm doing. Anyway, as I mentioned earlier, the 2 secondary programs that we have are Pando for middle school kids, and the Mental Health Association does PASS for young children. Okay, there we go. And the tertiary ones, meaning the ones that are actually working with kids that are already in the juvenile justice system, that's the 2 forms of detention advocacy, 2 different funding sources there. Functional family therapy, Learning the Ropes, which is the substance abuse program for kids, McAdams Academy, and the Teen Intervention Program. Okay. Pando Initiative, they want moderate to high risk youth. These are youth that have not yet come in contact with the system, but they show elevated items of concern in the different areas that we know we should look at if we're trying to focus on preventing delinquency. Most of the kids that they work with have elevated risk in the school domain. They are positioning themselves to do case management in the schools because they know that school behavior among middle school kids can be a pretty strong indicator. So they're working with them at that point. They served 83 youth. They had a 99% success rate. They were very effective. They had some struggles meeting some of their school-related outcomes, particularly keeping down the numbers of suspensions, that sort of thing. So we did do a corrective action plan with them. They came up with a plan that allows them to be not quite so much a consequence of bad behavior as presented more as an opportunity. So it's framing it a little different for kids. The other issue that they had as I was reviewing their materials is we really rely heavily on the assessment piece in all these programs. It's just key. They have to get that right so that we know these are actually kids that will become delinquents if there isn't some intervention done. And they were understandably focusing a bit more on the school issues and a bit less on the potential delinquency issues. So we've adjusted, and they've done exactly what we had hoped they would do. So this one is moving in a very good direction. Okay. The Mental Health Association is this cognitive approach with elementary school students. They do groups in the classroom. They go to schools where they're invited. One issue, they tried serving kindergarten kids and found out that that's not that easy with a cognitive effort. Kindergarten kids can be very busy and have some attention issues and things like that. So even though the curriculum says it serves that group, they've decided they probably will still steer clear of those kinds of things in the future. It's very entertaining to go and observe their work with kids when you see little people that are 5 and 6 years old saying, I don't have to argue about that. It's kind of surprising, and it does show you that it's very possible to do meaningful interventions with very young people, and that will actually make changes in their likelihood of properly addressing conflict, and that's kind of an exciting thing to see. They had 98% success rate. I mean, that's pretty darn close to perfect. They put themselves, they work with the school district to come up with where can we position this so that we're going to get the most out of it, where we're going to find at-risk youth and classroom situations that are conducive to successful delivery of this program. So they're pretty distributed, and we're pretty happy with where they're at. Detention advocacy, the KDOC Juvenile Services Grant provides, in addition to case management and short-term service, it also provides legal services. Sometimes we have youth who wind up in detention for things that they've done, and they don't have an attorney. And what's been proven to be the most consistently useful is to have a single source with very experienced attorneys who know and understand the juvenile system and can work with it. Kansas Legal Service provides that, and they sort of interlock with the case management so that there is a consistency there in who the youth deals with. And we want them to consistently keep looking at the detention population and drawing from it all the youth that need case management. We certainly think they're doing a good job when there's legal services involved. We want them to make a little bit extra effort, I guess you'd call it, to make sure that all the youth get consideration. So they're moving ahead. Their success rate is a little lower than we would like it to be for recidivism. We're working on that with them. So seems like I get a pause to catch my breath between every one of these. I'm used to working with the equipment. And their program that's funded through your crime prevention program is very much the same when it comes to the case management and short-term services. It's just designed to focus on the Hispanic-speaking population there. They have one case manager who speaks Spanish and who has some familiarity with that culture, so that extends that service and make it most useful to that group. So again, they have the same issue as the other side, which is there's a bit more reoffending in the population they've served. But remember that a lot of their people come through detention, which means they've already had some kind of a significant active delinquency. If you have any questions, commissioners, I don't have to just keep firing away at you here. Functional family therapy is an evidence-based program. It's quite intensive, and that would possibly be the reason for the rather poor performance in keeping clients. This one has been a little bit frustrating because they get referrals, but they don't keep them. It seems like a client will work with them for a session or two, and the client is a family, and it is a pretty intrusive kind of program, but they will keep them for a short period of time. And so we're working on them. They have a relationship with the National Consulting organization that provides the evidence-based functional family therapy and properly supports it. We're not real sure. We've been expecting that functional family therapy consultation would give them some advice that would improve it, and they understand we want them to do better. So hopefully that we have clear goals for them, and there's clear points within the delivery of the service so we can see exactly where the trouble is occurring. And so the engagement continues to be an issue, and they are trying to modify their service to make improvement. This is definitely a program that has a corrective action plan. We haven't seen the fruits of it yet, but it's relatively short time since they were asked to do the corrective action plan. Learning the Ropes Higher Ground is a substance abuse program. The majority of those they work with are from the Hispanic community. They had a good success rate for the numbers of youth that they served. 67, 52 completed with 37 successful. That sounds like maybe it isn't such an impressive number, but keeping youth in a substance abuse program is pretty challenging. And most of the literature out there says that if you keep it above 50%, you should be happy, and they did that. So even though you don't jump up and down with excitement over the level of success, I want you to understand that they're working with an extremely difficult population, and it's an important piece of our work here because it does address something that we know affects an awful lot of the people in our criminal justice system.
What's the age range of that group?
With the Learning the Ropes, those are, I think the youngest that they've served in their program is 13. The majority of the people that they serve are in the 14, 15 year age category. And so again, if you think about, this is somebody who at that age is beginning to show patterns of abuse. And not just abuse because it's against the law for them to use it, but abuse because of the level at which they're using it. So, yeah. It's a very strategic point in youth development, and it's the right point to have that effort for people that are already showing trouble dealing with this. McAdams, it's the third year for this program. They have begun to embrace the use. It's not an evidence-based program, but they are beginning to substantially use evidence-based practices. We've worked with them in their model. They have cognitive behavioral programming. They have direct school work sort of thing. This is a program where kids can actually get moving along and working on school issues, even though they're expelled or have a long-term suspension. So, and again, all of these programs are dealing with people that present significant challenges. They're just not easy populations to work with. I've been over at McAdams Academy a few times, and most of the time they served 30 last year, but most of the time when you're there, it can be anywhere from 14 to 20 kids. And some of these kids have major problems controlling their behavior, and they work with them and they time them out. They do all the stuff that it takes. So it's quite intensive. And, to get an 83% success rate with those kids is pretty impressive. So. And their success rate has gotten better every year, which is also kind of satisfying. The Teen Intervention Program was one of the programs that after the juvenile justice reform and back in 1999, this was one of the first programs. It has been with us through all that time. The domains, sorry, not the domains so much as the referral sources have changed. And what's happened is the district attorney's office has a greater depth of individual inside services for some of their kids. So they used to refer to this program, and they stopped making some substantial numbers of referrals, doing some things themselves. So the Episcopal Social Service, which is the agency that delivered this, said, you know, we're just not finding the demand for our program, so adios. And it's a loss to us. They did a good job, but they were correct in saying that the sources of referral that they had been used to using just simply weren't there, and they were not successful in finding new referral sources. So in that sense, I mean, you have to acknowledge when what you're offering doesn't have a customer, have to go away. So all of the programs have logic models that they have updated. The reason that's important is it's a vehicle for everyone who works in the program to understand the things that move us towards successful goals. If you have a logic model, it says these are the people that we're here to serve. This is how we're going to find them. This is what we're going to do that will have an effect. Here's the effect we're going to look for. And I've worked with them for the last couple of years to make sure they all have that clear understanding of the inside works. Because then when something isn't going right, you have the ability to see, well, where isn't it going right? And so it stands a great likelihood of improving things. Additional training was offered on assessment to Pando. They accepted that. They are now doing with fidelity the assessment that we need them to do. Corrective action plans were obtained for the programs that had 2 or more outcomes that were not met. And they all provided us with those corrective action plans. It's too soon to say exactly, you know, that they have found the exact right thing to correct, but they are in process with it. So that's pretty satisfying. In January, Dr. Beaupre, who's a criminal justice professor out at Wichita State, the two of us, she and I, offered an evidence-based practice training. And for all the providers, they all came, and we went through the internal things that are known to make positive impacts in programs. And I've made visits to all the programs in this quarter. Last week I was out with all the different programs, and they're all moving in the appropriate direction and working well with us. I'd say it's a very cooperative relationship. Chris, do you have anything you want to add about that? She's going, no. They are making every effort. That's the end of my slideshow there. Slow and purposeful as it was. If you have any questions about these programs, I think it's important that, especially considering that there's $582,000 plus of county money for this, the Division of Corrections and Glenda and Chris and Shardell, who's part of our work team, we all make sure these people understand that they have clear obligations, that they need to follow evidence-based practice so that you get the most for your money. And these outcomes are designed to make sure that's happening.
Questions from the commissioners? We did mention that $582,000 is going into this sometime, and not necessarily today, but could I get a breakdown of what goes into, out of that 582 that goes into each one of those different programs? And I'm glad to see that if a program like the teen intervention program isn't working, that we move on to something else that is working. Do we have something that's going to replace that, or where does the money go that's going into that?
So, Chris Collins, Division of Corrections.
No,
With
go.
the- okay.
With their exit in June, we attempted to do a short-term RFP to redistribute those funds, but what happened was there wasn't enough time to do the RFP, get a vendor in place, and have outcomes through the remainder of the contract year. And so the money was redistributed to training, and what's not used out of that fund will go back to the general fund, as I understand it. And we're currently in a new RFP process for the next 3 years, fiscal year 20 through 22. And we're working through that process right now to identify the vendors that will be chosen to distribute those funds to.
Okay. And it looks like most of these projects, programs are going to the USD 259 students. Do we have anything that is targeting our students in other school districts?
The Higher Ground program serves other communities besides Wichita. And when we did the new RFP based on your input at last year's presentation, we built into that the request that the programs look at serving all of the communities in Sedgwick County rather than just Wichita proper.
Good. Okay. Commissioner Howe?
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman. One of the first slides you showed us shows the filings, the admissions, and the custody cases. They've all gone down significantly. Some of that probably is because we're doing a good job, I assume. But there's also other things in play there. Senate Bill 367, I think, has a direct impact on that as well. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Excuse me. Senate Bill 367 was a major overhaul of the juvenile justice system. Their understanding of how to make forward progress with juvenile justice was to reduce the possible length of stay that a juvenile is under court supervision. There's some reasons for that, and it has to do with the possibility of contagion and giving the youth a clear set of new direction or new goals and sending them on their way. The other thing that's part of 367 is to keep kids out of home placement. That's kind of hard to say, but you understand the idea is that there's a fundamental belief that if the home situation can be remedied, that's the best way. And so in order for that opportunity to be safeguarded, they've kind of restricted the circumstances under which it might not be used. The final thing that accounts for a lot of what's been happening here locally is the fact that we used to have a determinate sentencing grid that put kids for certain kinds of offenses in juvenile correctional facilities. That's all but gone away. I'm sorry. All of a sudden I'm choking here. It's no reflection on how I feel about 367. I'm just joking. It's a very comprehensive bill. I'm sorry. I have a silly sense of humor. I apologize. But 367 is fundamentally closing the doors for a lot of things that we relied on for incapacitation in the past. And it's saying keep them in the community, keep them short-term under supervision. If you can't fix it quick, you probably can't fix it, so there they go. That's a quick and dirty version of that.
Yeah. So I guess I'm concerned about that. It seems like these numbers, going from 350 to 21 seems kind of hard to think that's because we just did a good job. I think we're just assuming that these these kids are going to be in the community, do what they do in the community, and we may not really be able to address those issues. There is no other option. In fact, I would tell you, our sync kids, the YRC 2s for sync kids, I think that's actually a growing population. There may be more beds in the state than there ever have been for that population, but for the JO kids, there's virtually none.
And if you look at some of the crime statistics, and I'm more familiar with the crime statistics on the adult side, Wichita Police Department has reported some increases in violent crime. And don't miss that. I'm not saying that we should be happy and take credit for this. I think you're making a very important point here, which is that options we used to have to deal with the more serious kids, whether they're sinks or whether they're juvenile offenders, those options are not available. So it's more incumbent on the community as a whole to offer these programs that join hands with the juvenile justice system than it's been before, because these kids are still here.
Yeah, I'm bothered by this particular slide. I think this is basically what this means to me is we're just not. We're doing the best we can with our programs, our community-based programs. But if the problem is out there that may be environmental to these kids, I don't know if we have a solution that's available to them, to us or to them, to kind of solve that problem. And I don't know that just by changing policy that this really addresses. If that's smart policy, I guess I'm concerned about that.
Well, I will tell you that there's some reinvestment grants that have come from the state. Glenda, will you talk about them? I love the Evening Reporting Center and some of the other things that are happening.
That was my next question: is where are those on this slides? I don't see them unless they're buried in here. I'm not sure.
I'm
I've seen them. Okay.
I'm not reporting on those.
Okay.
This report just deals with the programs that basically the ones that you fund and the tiny, small amount of state money that we get for a local grant for those things. But
All right.
So I'll tell you that the last piece of Senate Bill 367 comes to play July 1, and that piece is that no longer will detention facilities be able to house children in need of care kids and kids with valid court orders. Those will no longer be allowed to be in detention. So that is the last big ending of 367 that will be reflected. We've been adjusting all along, but across the whole state of Kansas, all the numbers in all the districts, the juvenile filings and services are all in a downward slope, every single one of them. There's not an upward tick at all. So some of the things that we're doing in Sedgwick County, which is what we did with our reinvestment dollars, was open what we call the Evening Reporting Center. And those were for kids that are juvenile offenders, but we also take other kids through the DA's diversion or JIAC. Any referral kid that needs that service, they can go. It's a one-stop shop where they can get every service that they need to get, and we put them appropriately in the programming based upon their risk level, where they're low, moderate, or high. Just a quick story to tell you. We had a young man who struggled. He's a juvenile offender living at home, but he got into trouble. He was over at our residential facility. He ran. We brought him back, ran again, brought him back. Finally, the judge placed him back at home. We put him in the Evening Reporting Center. He's getting his programming, did very well, got his degree, his high school degree, finished the program, and got a job at Spirit. We've had 3 success programs or kids like that ended up getting jobs at Spirit. So we are seeing successes, but it's not from them being placed out of home. It's what we're doing inside the home. We had therapy, MST therapy. We have therapists that are working with the families. We have substance abuse that's right there in our facility, so the kids are getting everything that they need when they walk in the door. And they get picked up and brought to the program at right after school, about 3:30, and the program lasts till 8 o'clock at night, and then they're taken back home. So we're keeping them busy and giving them the right kind of program in the right setting. It's not like, and they're getting incentivized, and that is something very different than what we have seen in the past. We have not always incentivized our clients on the adult and juvenile. It's always been very little incentives. These are big incentives. These are big carrots that we're holding in front of kids to get them to stay and not threatening them. So even if they say, well, I don't want to come, there's not a graduated sanctions that's going to put them in detention. So we're trying to get their involvement in a different way. And it's actually working, and we're having a lot of success with those kids. So, but that's some money that's come from the fact that the state is not sending kids to YRC2s. That's money that came back, and they have reinvested it into every community. And so that's what we're using our reinvestment dollars for.
So just so I understand, the dollars that Dr. Moreland talked about, that's property tax funds from Sedgwick County that we appropriate that money for those programs. Well, just for the record, I'm very supportive of all the things you're doing. I think you're doing a great job. Thank you. And then for you, Glenda, I also support what you're doing. I think it's very, very important. I guess I'm concerned about, are we doing enough? You know, if we're not if we don't have effective programs somewhere when we have a chance to fix these kids, I think we pay for it later on. They'll end up incarcerated, and they'll go in and out of the courts and the jail. I think that's where I want to make sure we're doing enough. And if we're not doing enough, please tell us what we can do differently. Even if it's not a state or federal problem, it may be a local interest that we would do what's needed there. And I want to make sure that the state gives us latitude to do that. So then that's the effort on our legislative platform for 367, is giving some control back to the local community to do what we think is best, giving us some options. And I don't know if you want to talk about that or not.
Well, I think that we've identified a real gap in our service. And, honestly, sometimes when we come up with these ideas, you really don't know how that's going to play out until it actually goes into effect and you see it working. And we're seeing that it's working. So we know this program is working. It's doing what it's supposed to be doing. Is it doing enough? There's always going to be other things that we're doing. We are doing gender-specific programming. We're trying to identify some of the female clients that we have, not just on the juvenile side, but also on the adult side, to get them the right programming. We are doing as much as I think we can do until the next set of problems. What we're seeing is that the kids that are going in detention are the real serious offenders. They need to be in detention. And that's what some of 367 really did do, is it kept the kids that really didn't need to be in detention away from detention and put the kids that really need to be in detention where they should be. And that has served us well. We also, with the reinvestment dollars, we hired what we called an expediter, and that is a kid that could be in detention but hasn't gone through, doesn't have a probation officer yet or any of those services. So he will advocate for them to get them, if the word is fast-tracked, out of detention as fast as possible. Identify whether they have other family members that they could go to or what their needs are, if there's a reason to move them out of detention. So that was something we thought we needed, and we decided it's what we needed. And so some of those kids are moving out of detention as well. So I think we're right-sizing for everything that's happening. And what 367 did is sort of sent us all for a little bit of a loop. We had to readjust and decide what fits and what's best for our community, and we're doing that.
I guess my final question is, if there's a one of these young folks that they're considered higher risk because of their environment, maybe they haven't committed something that puts them into detention just yet. Is it likely that they'll end up as a foster child that was taken out of that environment, put into a different environment, trying to deal with that environmental aspect of at what's going on in their life? I mean, is there an overlap in some of these kids removed from their environment because of things that are going on? Maybe it's drug abuse or neglect or domestic violence or whatever else may be going on there. Are they removed from that environment so they don't have that?
Right now
impact on
they
them?
are not.
Okay.
We are working with the family, getting them services. One of the other little components that we put together with our reinvestment dollar was the Parent Project, which is training for parents to deal with adolescent kids. This is a national parenting curriculum. We purchased it, trained all of our, I think about 40 people, including some of our regional partners. And we have that Parent Project going through. We're finishing up the second set of training, but we have had parents come back after going to that Parent Project and talk about how wonderful that program was, and that it created a support group for those parents that are struggling with their kids. And that's what it's supposed to do. The state has seen what we are doing with that Parent Project, and it has also picked up that Parent Project to deliver it out across the state, so that all counties in the state of Kansas can actually do it. It's an excellent program.
And that was something you guys developed here?
Well, we purchased.
So you
Yes.
recognized a need that you were going to fulfill it, and then the state recognized what you were doing. Good for you.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
So, so then other counties can also benefit from it. I sat in on several of the trainings for this Parent Project, and it's just, if you ever had a problem talking to your kids about drugs or different kinds of things, this really teaches parents how to have that conversation, that very difficult conversation, and makes them actually work through that during this process. And I believe that's a 10-week class that they come to. So I think we're doing a lot of really good things in Sedgwick County to address all the needs right now. I think the sink side is broken right now as well. Not sure, how that's going to get remedied. There's always going to be some backlash. We always see that. And we also have been working for, I don't know, maybe 4 years, maybe a little longer, with the crossover youth practice model, which is also something that's coming to the state, but we have been doing that for quite a while, and that's the youth that actually come into the sink case and then start to cross over in the juvenile offender. We've been working with family preservation to work with those kids individually to see what we can do to prevent that from happening. So,
Thank you for all you do. Appreciate you.
Thank you. Any other questions?
I would like to just add one thing that I think is potentially very useful to you, which is sometime in the first part of April, Glenda will be bringing the grant application to the state to you. That includes Team Justice's work on a comprehensive plan. That's a real opportunity to see the entire range of things that are going to be offered and where they come from. There's many different pieces coming together, each picking up critical pieces. And what I think is key to the high level of success is that they're all based on a lot of research about what you can do and how to do it so that you get the most for your money. So that's coming soon.
Dr. Craig Moreland and Glenda, thank you very much. We appreciate it. All right, Mr. Manager.
And our agendas. Bear with us for 5 or 10 minutes here. We'll go over the March 20 agenda very briefly, and I think I want to have Scott, maybe Justin, talk about a couple of the open or the new business items that are on the agenda. And this is a rough draft, so we don't have even letters on here yet, but Commissioner Cruz has a couple of appointments that we're going to start off the meeting with. Also, there's a proclamation at the beginning as well. There's 4 new business items. One is the resolution to amend Chapter 22, Article 2 of the Sedgwick County Code regarding utility permits. And I kind of would ask that Justin maybe give just a quick overview of that, please. Yeah.
Morning, Justin.
Morning, Commissioners. Justin Wagoner, Assistant County Counselor. Just for some background, the agenda item that I'm talking on is a companion item to one that Scott Knapel is scheduled to present the very next item on the agenda, as they both have to do with the same state statute and also the same state FCC ruling. In 2016, the Kansas legislature approved, with a Kansas statute became effective that required municipalities to allow cell towers in the public right-of-way, both cities and counties, with very limited grounds for municipalities to deny them, essentially public health, safety, and welfare, and that's about it. So in 2016, Sedgwick County, we don't regulate, either in the city of Wichita or Sedgwick County, the public right-of-way through our zoning code. Instead, in Sedgwick County, the way it's done is Public Works has, the county engineer has discretion to regulate that right-of-way, and that's done through a permitting process. And so in 2016, we amended our code to accommodate the changes in state law that went into effect that year. One thing that is part of the reason these two items are coming up is there's an FCC ruling this last fall, the Federal Communications Commission, that came down and said all local governments, if they want to regulate aesthetics for cell towers anywhere, whether it's in the public right away or as a zoning matter on private property, would have to adopt and publish those by April 12th of 2019. And so right now, as the county's permitting process that Public Works goes through does not consider aesthetics of what's going in there. And to build on that a little bit, part of what Scott Knapel is going to be presenting on also is zoning code changes to incorporate what was done in 2016, but also changes to the wireless communications master plan that largely deal with aesthetics as well. And so it's kind of a now or never, if you will, for local governments under that FCC ruling in terms of how aesthetics can be regulated. Now, it is worth noting that the statute in Kansas says you can't treat public utilities you can't treat cell towers any differently than you treat other public utilities in the right of way. And the extent that they allow you to provide notice to the neighbors is to the adjoining property owners, and you can get their feedback. So the agenda item on the 20th that I would be presenting would be a resolution that would allow the adjoining property owners to provide written feedback to Public Works when one of these towers or any other above ground apparatus 23 inches or larger in diameter is being put in the public right of way. The idea on 23 inches and talking with Public Works was that's big enough it's going to capture your things that are larger, whether it's a cell tower or a very large electrical pole, something that's maybe visually more of a nuisance or concern to the neighbors. But not to capture every single light pole that goes in that may be 9 or 10 inches or so in diameter, the smaller light poles. And then it would written notice would be provided to the adjoining property owners. They would be able to provide written comment to Public Works, and then Public Works would take that written comment and evaluate in the public health, safety, and welfare of that proposed cell tower, light pole, whatever above ground apparatus might be going in the right of way. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have on that. I know Scott could answer the zoning questions too.
Question for Justin?
Or Scott for the next agenda item. These are two. This is agenda item 1 and 2 on new business. What Justin and Scott will both be presenting next week. Any questions on either of those?
So this is kind of like with the West Star polls, for example. They didn't really disclose exactly what kind of pole it was, and they put these monstrosities up. Is that, sort of a similar situation?
It may be similar. I think you may be referring to when Westar used like eminent domain powers on somebody's private property. Is that what you're thinking of? Okay. And it's a little different because in that case they have state statutes that give them authority to do that. The county doesn't have any role in that. But these types of poles, when they would be located in the public right of way, they would be subject to this review. There'd be notice to the adjoining property owners, and then they could provide that the written notification to Public Works. So it would cover those types of things when they're going to be located in the public right of way, as long as they're 23 inches or more in diameter.
Are they sent something to their home?
Yes.
Okay.
The owner of record would be sent a letter.
So this is not a radius around the pole. This is just adjoining property owners. In other words, who's touching the right of way, so to speak.
That's correct. In most cases, you're going to have if it's in the middle of a property or on the right of way, it's going to catch both sides of the road. is what adjoining would be. If it's located right on a property line, sometimes they'll do that, so it has less impact on any of the property owners. Then you might have 3 or 4 property owners who would get notice.
So in that notification, are you going to let them know that any arguments that would be made for trying to disallow that need to be based on the issues of health, safety, and welfare?
Well, we haven't worked out exactly what the written communication would look like, but I think that there probably would be something to that effect because
Can't be property values.
Because it's really not a zoning matter, and it's not something that Public Works can deny for just any reason they want to. We have worked it into our utility permit code that Public Works staff can suggest a different location to the applicant to say, well, hey, this location isn't as good. Maybe you should consider another location. And I think in some cases, Public Works staff has seen that be successful with companies who've located in the right of way.
I would encourage our notification to include that caveat that if they're going to make an argument against the pole, that's got to be based on arguments of health, safety, and welfare, because we're going to have the same limitation. If they come to us with all kinds of other ideas, it just puts us in an awkward position.
Yep, I think that makes sense.
Okay. Thank you.
Other questions? You said that we have to have this in by the 1st of April. I know that our wireless master plan takes care of all of our current technology, but we're heading towards 5G and all kinds of other technologies. Is this going to be in here, or we're going to have to amend it again?
Scott Knable might be better suited to address that question, Chairman.
Yeah, the wireless communication master plan amendment that you have is intended to take us into the future. It will address the issues of the 5G or other types of technology. And in fact, if you look at the plan that the county and the city adopted back in 1999, it even in 1999 predicted what we're seeing today. We used a pretty knowledgeable consultant at that time and have maintained that plan to where we think we have a really good plan to address the future, which we see being significantly more facilities that are significantly shorter than what we've seen in the past. And given the efforts of the wireless industry to lobby at the state and federal level, likely many of those are going to be in the right of way. And I think the biggest reason they're doing that is cost. It's cheaper for them to locate it in the right of way than it is to rent property from somebody else.
One final question: is there any place in the planning code or anything like that defines these terms, health, safety, and welfare? In other words, if someone wanted to say, I think it's health because I have mental problems about looking at this tower, does that qualify for a health argument, or are these terms defined as to what these mean in terms of how they would be looked at objectively?
There are, and they're mostly not local. As it relates to the types of issues that you're talking about in terms of the health impacts of a wireless facility, the local government can't regulate that. That as long as the provider gets their FCC license to emit the radio frequencies that they're emitting, then that is the only control. There is preemptively, since I think 1996, no local government regulation of the health impacts of radio frequency on individuals. In terms of the plan itself that we're presenting to you, it does provide some aesthetic guidelines as it relates to, we've had aesthetic guidelines for a long time for wireless facilities on real property, but this puts in place aesthetic guidelines for the right-of-way. So I think adopting this, and the way I read the Federal Communication declaratory ruling, we will have more than just health, safety, welfare considerations as it relates to facilities in the right-of-way that we can address if we adopt this plan and publish these aesthetic standards.
Thank you.
Well, Scott and Justin, thank you. I believe that the planning department does a great job of keeping our wireless master plan up to date. I appreciate what their efforts and all the folks that are involved in it.
The only other new business item for the 20th is Chris Laborn will come in and talk about some technical changes they're going to make to the on-site water well advisory board, and essentially that's just cleanup. I'm sorry. Oh, I'm sorry. Chris, you want to go over that real quick? Sorry, didn't see it.
Yes, good morning, Commissioners. Chris Lieberman, MABCD. So the Water Well Board, when first formed, it specifically had membership from some organizations. Those are no longer in place, and we also, in general, we don't do that, don't have a board member specific from an organization. So we also had a geologist on the board, which we have been unable to replace, and any organization associated with them has, with geologists in the area, has stated that they're not really interested in participating. So we've, just as Mr. Stoltz said, we've listed those as we do other board members with qualifications just specific to the position, no organizations, and then we replaced the geologist with a master plumber actually on the board, as we've had a lot more involvement with the plumbing industry there.
Any questions, Chris?
Thank you.
Chris.
All right.
Then we have Board of Bids and Contracts, and then we have a consent listing. Most is routine. A couple I'll bring to your attention. There's a grant award, a budget authority for a grant award for the amateur radio group. It's to replace some repeaters within the county, and then the district attorney has a staffing table change where he is cleaning up some clerical positions in his organization. He's run it through HR and budget, both of which have approved. One is a position to increase his ability to enter journal entries in a timely manner so that the process runs efficiently, and also to handle some sync cases. So that's an overview of next Wednesday's agenda. If there's no other questions, or if you want somebody to come to your office to give you more of a briefing, just let me know and we'll set that up for you.
Any questions?
Yeah, I'm curious, what's the red line for our CMB code changes? What's that about?
We are coming, Justin's still here, we are coming to your office. We have scheduled times with you to come talk about that.
All right, thank you.
Any other questions? You have anything else? Very good. Anything from the staff today? Mr. Spears, welcome. Is that a trophy from KU? I wouldn't be able to know it.
We're okay. Every dog has his day. Just wanted to mention to everybody that Mark Furry won this Public Relations Award for the County Weed Directors Association of Kansas. And it's not a subjective thing, it's objective, but the things they do, like at the county fair, they set up a booth, and then how he handles landfill. I don't know if all of you know, but he has to talk to landfill, mostly farmers out there, if they have weeds, to try to get them taken care of. So he does a real good job at that, and I just wanted to tell everybody about today. And he is going to be the president of their County Weed Directors Association this next week.
Super. We'll pass on our congratulations. Anything else today? Good. Any other staff, anything? Any of our electeds today? No. Fire Chief, thank you for sending our little notes that we've been getting on the fires. We hadn't been getting those in the past, and I find them informative. The only thing is, I don't know what A, B, C, and D are, but beyond that. Anything else? Okay, we're adjourned. Thank you all.
Yep. We need it.